Hello and welcome to the Sideboard here at the StarCityGames.com Invitational in Columbus, Ohio. I am Nick Miller. I'm alongside somebody everyone knows, Gerry Thompson.
Maybe not. I was gone for a while.
How you doing, sir?
I'm good. I think they forgot about me.
It is excellent to have you in the Sideboard. My first time talking to you in the Sideboard. Yep. You're returning back to the Invitational scene. You're a two-time Invitational champion. You're playing Green Splash Black Devotion. You wrote about this in your premium side article.
Yep.
Talk about the deck, why you should play the deck, and why it's awesome.
So I'm not going to necessarily recommend this deck. We're going to see how I do this weekend. I think it's pretty good. One of the main selling points is that it's pretty good against Black Devotion, and I think a lot of people don't really know that, and I didn't even know it myself when I started playing this deck. But then I started playing the Black Devotion decks on Magic Online, and people playing this deck would side in Setessan tactics against me, kill like my Lifebane zombies, my pack rats. I won't be able to attack them. And then they'd eventually just draw into something like a Gerry Caller of Beasts and just run me over. And I was like, at first I was like, you know, tactics against a black deck, they don't have many creatures, that doesn't seem very good, but it is very good. As long as you are just like killing their creatures, making sure they can't put pressure on you, you have a better late game than they do. So that's kind of what sold me on this deck.
Tactics, a card that is what I would consider a sleeper right now.
Oh, for sure.
People need to know about this card.
Yeah, I mean, if you're playing something like Mono Blue Devotion, or even like the Mirror Match, like that card's pretty busted there, or like Mono Red Devotion, Mono Red Aggro, Mono Black Aggro, like this is a card that you should be scared of, for sure. Like, on like turn 3 or 4, like this can just kill all of your creatures and leave them with everything still. So, I mean, this card is very, very powerful, and you need to have a plan for this.
Yeah, and especially in a deck, you know, I've seen a couple of Naya decks try it out, but in a deck where you have all of the green mana, to where when you strive it, you get to use all of its activations.
Oh yeah,
It's basically a one-sided graph.
It can be. I mean, the creature base in this deck, for the most part, is pretty small, but Burning Tree Emissary goes a long way towards helping the tactics, so you actually have a bunch of bodies. But if you go like Elf into Caryatid into like nothing really, like maybe you're not going to tactics their entire team. Right. So we were talking before this about your green-white aggro deck, and like the creatures in that deck are all pretty big, you know? So like I would be more excited about playing tactics in that deck than this one, but it's still very, very good.
Even people playing like Jund Monsters are using it now too.
Oh yeah.
I think it's going to come about in a big way.
Yeah, I do too.
Well, let's go over your deck. You've got all the mana dudes: Voyaging Satyr, Elvish Mystic, Caryatid, Courser.
Basically, it bridges the gap between like 3 mana and 6 mana. It helps you get to Garruk mana naturally if they're killing your mana creatures.
And then of course, Burning Tree Emissary, because you're a Nykthos deck. Right. Into your big things: Pelucranos, your Eidolon of Blossoms to help you draw infinite cards, Gerry Caller of Beasts as your drawing engine. Yep. And then your God package, which 2 Nylea, 1 Pharika.
Yeah, so this is basically Standard's combo deck. You can win games by just like nickel and diming people with like Burning Tree Emissaries and like, you know, monstering a Pelucranos and attacking them with that. But for the most part, what you want to do is draw some cards with Eidolon of Blossoms, Gerry Caller of Beasts, make a bunch of mana with Nykthos, and then just kill them in 1 turn with Nylea. And, you know, you don't have to, but it's like you get a lot of free wins that way. Burning Tree Emissary helps that a lot.
What would you consider your particularly tough matchups with this deck?
So if I don't draw tactics, or, you know, like Pelucranos, if they get a fast draw with flyers, so like Mono Blue Devotion is one of the toughest ones, but if you do draw the right cards for the matchup, you know, basically your sideboard cards, then I think that matchup's fine. Other than that, like fast decks can just run you over. Blue-White Control is definitely tough because their Supreme Verdicts take out a bunch of your mana sources. Right. So that plan, or that deck requires a pretty big like sideboard plan that I'm not playing, just because I don't think there's going to be a lot of it. But yeah, that one is probably the toughest.
And how have you been preparing for this Invitational?
Playing a lot of Magic Online, just a ton. Just grinding 8-mans and daily events. I started by playing basically like every deck in Standard, and eventually settled on either Black Splash Green or Green Splash Black, and this is where I ended up. Did
anything surprise you in your testing with playing all of the decks? Any deck better than you thought it was, worse, you know?
Not really. Like the Red Devotion decks were pretty good, but they just fell a little short. Like I would rather play a deck like this. But I mean, like everything seemed on like the verge of playability, you know? Right. It was like, if this deck were just like a little bit better, I would consider playing it. But I think Blue-White Control is probably the one that disappointed me the most, but it was definitely the one I tried the least also.
Yeah, I feel like in the Nykthos power decks, you know, the red deck is good, but no deck other than the screen deck is really utilizing the huge amount of mana the way Nylea and Pelucranos can really do.
You can almost certainly use your mana every turn. This deck goes over the top of any other deck with Garruk and Nylea, whereas the red deck is just like, oh, I'll play a Stormbreath Dragon and like hope that's good enough. And like, yeah, that plan's usually pretty good, but This deck, like if they give you enough time, you're going to draw a bunch of cards. Your deck is very, very consistent, and you basically just own the late game as long as they're not playing a Revelation deck.
What's the biggest amount you've monstrous your Pelucranos for in your testing?
Like 30 or something. Like I've basically done it all except for play turn 2 Garrick. I've never had that draw, but I've gotten to like turn 3 it, which is obviously very good. But it's like, man, I want that nut draw.
Maybe you'll have it one time here at the end.
That would be awesome. If I was just saving it up for this tournament, that'd be great.
Let's take a look at the sideboard here. You have a couple extra Farikas.
Yep.
You said that's great against the black decks?
Yeah, so the black 1/1 Death Touch Snakes block Lifebane Zombie, block their Pack Rats, get sacked to Demon, and like they can drain you out with Grey Merchant. It doesn't stop everything, but for the most part, it is really good against that, especially, they have to like try and kill your mana creatures to slow you down and stuff. So by the time you play Farika, you're gonna probably be making like 3 or 4 snakes over the course of the game, and that's usually enough to slow them down, let you hard cast Garrick, and get an advantage that way.
Not to mention, if you have the Eidolon drawing cards off those snakes as well.
Dude, I keep forgetting about that, because it's like, that is the dream scenario, and I'm just like, I'm not incorporating it in my game plan, like that is never my plan, but when it happens, and like it just triggers on Magic Online, I'm like, oh, that's fantastic.
Might as well get these cards too.
Yeah, exactly.
And then of course you have a couple Arbor Colossus. I'm assuming that's for Stormbred Dragons, Demons?
Yep, and just, a normal blocker against Mono Blue Devotion, maybe kill a Night Veil or something, but yeah, the flyers are definitely a big issue, so having a 6/6 reach guy is very good. If like Stinger Fling Spider was legal, I would probably play that instead, but I think this is the best we have.
Excellent. You have your 2 more copies of Setestan Tactics, so going for full 4.
Yeah, I like the full 4 against basically any creature deck. I only have 3 against black, just because their game plan is to like kill all your guys and stuff, and you don't want to draw too many, but drawing 1 per game is definitely very good.
Also, just from tactics, sometimes you use it the +1/+1 as a trick.
Yep, I've done that before too.
Nylea's Disciple.
Yep.
Burn.
Burn, definitely. There's some matchups like Jund Monsters and Mono Blue Devotion where it is very much like a racing game. So it depends on how they sideboard. Like the blue deck can bring in a bunch of like hard counter spells, slow their deck down, and then maybe you don't want the Disciple because it's like more of a grindy thing, and this card doesn't really matter. And same thing with Jund Monsters. If they board in a bunch of removal and take out like a bunch of threats, then you don't really need this thing. So you kind of have to play it by ear, but for the most part against like something like Burn, like yeah, you definitely want this guy. This guy's awesome, gains you like 6 life.
Yeah. Scavenge Ooze in the board here. Now this guy does a lot of work, a lot of the creature matchups, a lot of the removal matchups where you just land him, get a huge guy, things like that.
And like I was talking about earlier, the problem with Tactics is that your guys are pretty small. So when I board in Tactics and I actually have like, some ways to kill the creatures, I also want a bigger body to make this work. So just 2/2 to start is fine, kill 3 of their guys, then it's a 5/5, you gain some life. I ended up cutting the 4th Nylea's Disciple, but I have these to gain some extra life. So
those come in against Burn as well, or not so worried about the creatures dying?
There are certainly games where they have to kill your creatures, and like Searing Blood just incidentally kills your creatures, but you can get into games against them where they're like, oh crap, I'm super far behind, I have to like kill some of your guys to start slowing you down, and then Ooze is good, but like I don't really like Tactics against them, and their Eidolons probably aren't going to be blocking, so it's very rare that things die, but it is still good. It's still like an early threat.
Okay. Of course, full suite of Golgari Charms.
Yeah, see, my plan against Control would be Peregrination, which is like the Cultivate with Scry, just to hit your land drops naturally so you can actually get the 6 to cast Garrick, and then some Disenchants to kill their Detention Spheres and stuff. So Jim Davis's blue-white deck with Planar Cleansing is a lot more difficult to fight that way, but I also need like another Planeswalker, like another engine, like an Ajani or Xenagos alongside that. But I wanted the Black Splash for Farika, and I didn't want to devote like another slot to either splashing another color or like playing Vraska, which is not really a threat. So I just went with the 4 charms. It's not a great plan against them, but if you get to regenerate from Supreme Verdict, you should be okay. Yeah.
I was going to ask if Davis's new version of Control, which a lot of people might adapt to, if the charm is still just as good because you're not going to be hitting the D spheres and the Banishing Lights.
Yeah, I mean, it's fine if you use it to get one of their spheres, but mostly you want to regenerate from Supreme Verdict and just keep your board and like trying to keep hitting them. So in some ways, the charm is actually better because you can always save it for a Wrath or Planar Cleansing. You never actually have to use it to like kill a sphere and try and kill them that way. So plus it has some uses. I can bring in a couple against Burn to kill Eidolon and Chain to the Rocks, and then like Mono Black aggro kills a bunch of their guys, kills their
best
bestow
card
guys.
against Mono Black aggro. Just everything.
You have to be careful. You can't bring in too many spells. It dilutes your deck, makes your Garricks worse. But there are some matchups where you take out Garrick and then it's okay. So, but just something to be aware of.
Well, we're filming this in round 1. You have a bye still left over from all your infinite points from just winning invitationals and top 8ing everything.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sad. I've had 2 buys in like all these tournaments, but after my hiatus or whatever you want to call it, I'm very happy to have my 1 buy, and I like my deck, but we'll see. Ask me at the end of the day how much I like it.
You're back in a big way. We're all excited to see you back on the scene. I'm excited.
I'm excited to be here.
You're excited.
Yeah.
Hopefully this deck works out for you. So thank you for joining me here in the sideboard. Stay tuned all weekend long for more action here at the StarCityGames.com Open Series Invitational in Columbus.